do is I'll go ahead and introduce Auren. Auren will go ahead and give a presentation, then we'll take some time afterwards for questions and answers. Auren? How many people spend time managing their portfolio of assets, managing their stocks, or where you put your money, or those things? How many people here spend a lot of time doing this? Okay. You have no assets. Well, basically, the thesis of this talk today is, depending on how old you are, if you're young, it's probably a waste of time to spend time doing that. And then as you get older, it's more and more important to do that. But as you get younger, there's other types of things you should spend a lot of time on your asset allocation. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you think about your hard assets, right, your stocks, your bonds, your cash, what we're really going to talk about is your soft assets, which is your connections, your knowledge, and your reputation. And the younger you are, the more important your soft assets are. The older you are, the more important your hard assets are. So if you think about, the little graph, the importance of your soft assets decrease over time. When you're like 120 years old, it doesn't really matter, like building some new connections or something like that, right? But you know, when you're 20 years old, it's like really, really important. Or your knowledge, like when you're 120 years old, it doesn't really matter what new knowledge you get, but when you're 20, it's really important maybe to go to college or to get new knowledge doing some of these things. Now, the importance of your hard assets are the exact opposite. Right? They're growing the exact opposite. So it doesn't, you know, when you're young, you kind of live off the land, it's kind of important. As you get older, the importance of your soft assets, even when you're 120, really doesn't matter anymore either. But it does start growing. Maybe there's some sort of asymptotic line. So if you think about it, let's say you're a pretty well off 30-year-old, right? Let's say you've got $2 million in liquid assets. And let's say if you spend a lot of time focusing on your hard assets, if you can make an extra 2% a year, right? That would be if you did a really good job. You would make an extra 2% a year rather than just throwing in some S&P 500 or some bond funds. That means you'd have to earn an extra 40K a year, right? Which is pretty significant. It's not bad. It's pretty significant. But my hypothesis is that the time that it took you to do that would not be worth your time, as opposed to if you were going to instead focus that time on your soft assets and your soft asset allocation, which is what we're going to talk about today. So, the hard assets, people talk about, 60% stocks, 20%, whatever. So I've got a thesis for soft asset allocation. If you're 30 years old, maybe you spend 60% on your career, 20% on your knowledge, 15% on your connections, 4.9% maybe on other stuff, and maybe 1.1% on your hard asset allocation. The most important thing that I think to think about when you think about your asset allocation is your time, right? And people always say time equals money, right? Time versus money, all these other types of things. And time is very important. When you think about your asset allocation, you should think about how am I going to be allocating my time. Or you should be allocating, first of all, you should be allocating a lot of time to have a good time. Have fun, right? And you're going to allocate some time to your kids or your parents or your wife or husband or whatever it might be. But people, I think, spend way too much time on the money part and not too much time on the time part. You can also buy time. So, my slow laptop doesn't move for some reason. This is what happens when you have a Windows laptop.
Very good point.
Exactly. You should spend time investing in a better laptop. Which is what I did, and then I had to return it. So we'll wait a little. You can buy time. Time is a very fungible commodity. Most people think, well, I can't buy time, but you can. Pretty much anything you can do, you have an opportunity to do something a little bit faster. You have an opportunity to, that's why people hire assistants to buy time. That's why you can buy, I mean, for instance, I'm a saving nut. When I go to the supermarket, I'm always looking for the best deal. That's actually a pretty bad use of my time. I do that anyway because that's just my personality, because I just really want the best deal. But and I know it's not necessarily a rational thing to do, because I end up like spending like 30 minutes saving like $2. to get like the perfect deal on those avocados or something. But it's not, you should think about what your time allocation and how you can potentially buy time. We'll let this thing reboot over here. When you think about one of the key things you should be thinking about in your asset allocation is your connections. And you should be thinking about how to map your connections and how to think about the people that you know and how that network works. Has everyone read or heard of Mark Vandermeer, who wrote The Power of Weak Ties? A couple of nods, there are a couple of people raising their hands. So the basic thesis is that he did this study on how people found their jobs. And not surprising, he found that, let's say, 80% of people found their jobs through someone they know, right? Makes sense. However, then he looked into it a little bit closer. He said, well, who are these people that they know? Who are these people that actually found the job? It turned out that about 70-something% of the 80% of the people found their jobs through people that they don't actually know that well. These acquaintances, what he calls weak ties. So we started looking into that. Why is that? Why are you finding it? His basic thesis was that when two people know each other really well, like maybe you and your best friend, you tend to know a lot of the same friends, so your network overlaps. And so the chance that you're going to find somebody from one of those jobs, the chance that I'm going to introduce you to a new job is pretty low. But when you have when you find someone you don't know that well, but you have some sort of connection with, they can introduce you to a whole new network. And so the weak ties, and we're going to talk more and more about the weak ties are going to become increasingly important. I had all these beautiful slides here that you're not going to be able to see, unfortunately. Much better without the slides, yeah. I agree. So, people often ask, and there's all these different books that I write about, what's the secret of being a connector? And my basic thesis of being a secret of being a connector is just two words, one phrase, to make things very easy. All you have to do is help people. It's very easy. So all you do every time you see someone, just figure out how you can help them. And the more you help people, the more you'll end up like becoming a connector, essentially, if that's the goal. And actually, it's a pretty fun thing to do. It's a good thing to do regardless, even if you don't have any type of end in mind. The easy thing about, I basically have this I wonder if I have a whiteboard up here. So we're going to get a whiteboard instead. Yeah? All right, perfect. Now we need a whiteboard pen. One over there? Yeah. All right, great. This is perfect. We're going to go low cat. Did everyone see this? Great. Black, black, blue. Always out to screw everyone they see. Right? And they're always out to just like totally screw with people. They're not good people. We all know people like that. They're not good people. Then there's the guys over here. These guys are like the Machiavellian types. You know, they're not great people, and they're always trying to get a better deal, but they understand the world, and so they're just going to have to do something to get something in return. They just don't want to give you as much as they want back, right? Then there's like, you know, the people, most people in the middle, I call them the back scratchers, right? The back scratchers, I scratch your back, you scratch my back. We do a deal together. You know, kind of like, you know, you need a Coke, a nice cold Coke. I've got, you know, I need $1. I'll give you the Coke for $1. It's kind of a good deal both ways. We're helping each other out. Then there's the karma people over here. The karma people think like, okay, I'm just going to do good in the world, and then it's going to kind of come around and hit me. Right? And that's kind of, so that's the next highest level up. And then there's like the highest level people. And they just be good just to be good. There's no other reason. They just want to be good. So my goal of this talk is to try to get you to move up this way, and at least get you to the karma section, at least convince you about the karma section. I might not convince you to get over here, but at least get you to the karma section over here. Either way, you'll probably be doing the same action. My other thing to convince you is that networking is a really bad, dirty word, and you shouldn't try to do it. It's just really counterproductive, and I don't think it works very well. So, and basically, I don't think you should actually try to ever meet anybody. I don't think it really means, I think you should just try to meet people in general, try to do cool stuff, meet someone in the supermarket or whatever, or meet someone at an event like this where you're trying to learn about something. But I don't think you should actually try to go out and meet somebody. I don't think that works. Has anyone actually, there's a book out there called Never Eat Alone. Has anyone heard of this book? It's by Pelle Braendgaard. Okay. This is the worst book on the planet. If you read this book, you are reading exactly what you should not do. This whole book is about this guy who apparently is this great networker who knows like a gazillion people, who has like 3 Palm Pilots going at the same time, and like 16 assistants to deal with his life or something. And he has this great story about how he wants to meet Richard Branson. Now, who doesn't want to meet Richard? I mean, he's a cool dude, right? You know, always virgin. Yeah, he's a cool dude. Like, I don't get hurt. Who doesn't want to meet Richard? He's cool. So he goes through this whole theory, this whole chapter in the book of how he meets Richard Branson. He first studies everything about Richard Branson. He reads like 4 biographies on Richard Branson. He's getting Richard Branson come out of his heels, right? Then he decides exactly. Then he starts to get involved in Richard Branson's charities, the same charities that Richard Branson did. Because in his whole thesis, when you meet someone, you only have like 15 seconds to make a good impression. So he memorizes what he's going to say when he finally meets Richard Branson. And he does all these other things, and then, of course, finally, he did a situation where, you know, he's in the elevator or whatever, he's introduced to Richard Branson, and he's got 15 seconds to make an impression, and of course, he's practiced, so he makes his impression, and he now meets Richard Branson, and the moral of the chapter is that they're best friends. Of course, until Richard Branson reads the chapter, right? It's a horrible story. I mean, this guy's this very calculated guy who, like, does all these things to meet people. I think you should do the exact opposite. You know, essentially, has anyone heard of this guy? This guy was on YouTube recently. Alexei Vayner. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Right? This was the guy who, like, I wish I had my little YouTube video to show this guy. You know, he went out, he applied for a job at Bear Stearns, and he has himself, like, doing karate and playing tennis, and, you know, like, don't be this guy. Don't try to overexpose yourself. Don't try to be this guy. Don't try to have everyone know how cool you are. Just be a good person. Just go out and be a good person. Now, sometimes people will question your motives. People will be like, why is this guy trying to be a good person? Why is this guy trying to help you? Why is he trying to... But don't worry about it. Just be good. It will actually work out in the end. Everyone you've actually had an interaction with, and you've actually been around, will know that you're a good person, and maybe some of the other people won't. One thing when you think about your portfolio, when you think about everyone you meet, think about it as an investment. So just like when you make an investment in a company, think about making an investment in people. So every time you meet a person, just think about, okay, how can I help this person? How can I help this person grow? How can I help them reach their potential? Maybe there's not that much you can do, but think about how much you can help them. And you should actually choose who you want to meet and who you want to build a relationship, in my opinion, based on how much you can help them, rather than the other way around. Like, for instance, pretty much nothing that I can do for Eric Schmidt right now, the CEO of Google. There's pretty much nothing I can do for him. So there's really no reason for me to go meet him. I mean, there's really nothing I can do to help him. He's trying to have a pretty good life. You know, he's a pretty good. So, like, nothing really I can do can actually help him. Now, maybe a new MBA that just graduated from Stanford, maybe that person I can help. Maybe there's a lot that I could do with that person. And maybe when I was younger, maybe there was a lot I could do with someone who's just graduating college. Maybe I was even younger than that, maybe with someone who's just graduating high school. Right? But, you know, you should work with the people that you can actually help. So let them get value out of the relationship. No sense you have to get value the other way in return. The other thing is, the most important thing when you build connections with people is to spend your connections. It's the exact opposite of money. In money, if you have money and you spend it, you're no longer happy. And it's usually not a wise thing to try to spend your money. When you have connections, it's the exact opposite. When you have a connection, they actually atrophy if you don't spend them. So you've got to spend your connections, and you should spend them judiciously, and you should try to connect as many people as you can to other people. Now, when you're connecting two people, you can't just spend willy-nilly. Where you can't connect someone, you have to make sure that both people value from the connection that's made, right? So if I introduce someone to Chris, and Chris gets really mad at me for introducing this person to Chris, then Chris is probably not going to want to be introduced to the next person I want to introduce him to. So you have to think of both sides when you're making the connection happen.
I will say that Auren has introduced me to many people over the years that have always found the introduction worthwhile.
Thank you. So, I'll give you the $20 later.
I raised my price recently, 50.
That's reversed. So, so you want to be able to spend your connections in an effective way. It's kind of like, think of it as setting people up on a date, which is the same exact scenario of connection. Right? The key thing of setting people out on a date, I do a lot of setups, I love setting people up on dates. The key thing of setting people on a date is not that they get married. So if you can setting people up on a business deal, it's not that they actually consummate the deal. The most important thing when you're setting two people up on a date is that they actually enjoy meeting one another. They don't even have to go on a second date. That it was an enjoyable experience for both of them, and they're both happy that they met the other person. It was worth their time. If they spent an hour or whatever, it was worth their time. And that's what you have to do when you think about when you're putting two people together. As long as they're going to come out and say, you know, I'm really happy I met Chris, and Chris says, I'm really happy I met this other person, then it works out really well. Otherwise, it's not good. But in that scenario, it's always good. You should be spending your connection judiciously to do that. The other thing I think is really interesting is that successful people return calls. If you have, what do Tom Siebel, Steve Jobs, and Steve Ballmer all have in common is that they all have what's called a 24-hour rule. If you email them, they will get back to you, or somebody will get back to you within 24 hours. Guaranteed. You can try it tonight if you want. As long as it's not like a stalker email or something. If it's a well-formed email that has some sort of legitimate thing, they will get back to you, or somebody, their assistant, or vice president, or someone will get back to you within 24 hours. Now, I noticed this when I was in college, because when in college, I was a little bit crazy, and unlike today, I probably wouldn't bother Eric Schmidt today. I used to email these guys, these three guys in particular, when I was in college, and when I was an engineer at Berkeley. And they would always email, they would email me back personally, you know, and right away. And so my question was, are they successful because they get back to people in 24 hours, or do successful people get back to people in 24 hours? Right? And I'm still not sure today, but I figured why chance it and just get back to people. And so anytime I clear all my emails out personally before I go to bed every day. And if I can't get back to people, if there's something big, I'll usually say something like, this is really important. I'll send them an email. I will get back to you with a full response on Thursday or something like that. And I'll let them know. Because the worst thing in the world is when someone sends you an email and then they're just waiting. And they're wondering, like, well, did he get my email? Did he not? It's kind of gauge. You know, did he get my email? Did he not? What's happening on this particular thing on this front? So give them a status of what's going on, even if you can't give them the full thing right away. The other thing about connections is I used to actually, my job used to be, before I actually went back to the startup world, my job used to be to actually help people kind of grow their connections and stuff. And what I find is actually people are really good at meeting people. Pretty much everyone across the board, especially like anyone who's relatively successful, is really good at meeting people. But people are really bad at maintaining those connections. So they're good at creating connections, but really bad at maintaining those connections. And it's actually like 100x harder to maintain connections than to actually create connections. So what are some ways that people maintain connections? What are some ways?
Something that I do that I think it's brainless, but people seem to like it. Is I actually, I try to write down people's birthdays, and I actually send them a note on their birthday, and I actually send them a personalized note. I ask them about the things I do going on in their lives, or if their kids gotten older, or what have you. And a lot of people write and say, oh, you're the only person who wrote to me on my birthday, which I think is very sad. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great idea. That means at least once a year you're going to be able to maintain a connection with other people. What are some other ideas? Yes.
I do it on New Year's Eve.
Okay.
I tend to send out a Happy New Year to people that I haven't been in touch with for a while. They, what's going on with the news?
Okay.
And they had like an 85% return.
Wow. Everyone's like Washington Clark together. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Well, it wasn't necessarily exactly a thing, but it came back to conversation over.
That's great.
Right,
right, exactly. The lower time effort of person. You're going to share each of some links. You're going to comment on blog posts. Yeah, those are both really good ideas. Commenting on blog posts, sharing interesting leads. Those are really good. Some people write blogs, and then people read them, so they kind of get updated about those. People are going to persist that, do a good job of that. What are some other things? Yeah.
Well, I know something that a number of people do success is they throw parties. They have social occasions where they see people they like.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So, like, throwing dinners, throwing parties, any of those types of things are really good. And, my only advice on that is, my basic thesis is to never send Christmas cards. Right? I don't know about you, but like nowadays you get like 200 Christmas cards from like everybody and every company you've ever been in and your dentist, and you just get lots of Christmas cards, right? So if you want to send like a holiday card or something like that, send them a physical card. I would send it on like Arbor Day or some random holiday or something like, on Arbor Day I cut down a tree and sent you the card. Something like that, so that people see you stand out in their mind and they remember you, or some other types of things, or a Christmas half year day, or some sort of anniversary of something special, like the day the transistor was founded, or something that might be special in your life, the day the Pythagorean theorem was created. I don't know, whatever it is. Yes.
The other problem is sending birthday cards to a professional acquaintance whom you don't know too well, that you could just end up there in the Machiavellian cycle. Right?
Sorry, you could what?
You could end up in that one of the bottom two.
They might think you're Machiavellian?
I mean, if you're a professional acquaintance, then you make twice it.
I don't think so. I think if you're doing that, if you're bringing them joy by telling them happy, everyone likes to hear happy birthday. My birthday's coming up. I would love to hear happy birthday.
I don't even know you too well.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's great to say happy birthday to people. Everyone wants to hear happy birthday. It's wonderful. So maybe there's a few people that might get weirded out by that, but who cares about them? Like the vast majority of people are going to be pretty happy to hear something. Or if you see them in the newspaper, send them, hey, congratulations! I saw this deal about you in the newspaper, or I read about you on this blog. Congratulations, or something like that. Those are great. I think people want it. If people are successful, you should celebrate their success. I mean, there's two types of people in this world. I call them lovers and haters. There's people that, like, when they see someone else's success, they're like, good for him, that's awesome, right? And there's people when they see someone else's success that they're very envious and they want to cut them down. And I would say Silicon Valley is filled with lovers, and maybe places like New York and LA might be more haters. And it's great here. Like, everyone I know, when YouTube sold, everyone was like, this is awesome. I mean, everyone I know was incredibly happy, right? In New York, it's a little bit different. Sometimes there's a little bit of envy going on. In LA, there's for sure a lot of envy going on. But I think it's great to celebrate other people's success. So the other thing I think to focus on, besides your connections, is also your knowledge. A lot of people think like it's not what you know, but who you know, and I think that's a little bit of baloney. I think it is really important what you know. And I think the more knowledge you are on a specific topic, the better you are at actually getting more people, and meeting more people. You'll have a reason because they can get value out of you. I have a friend who's a very successful venture capitalist, and she happens to be a huge dog lover. She loves dogs. She has dogs. She knows everything about dogs. She is on the board of the Humane Society in San Francisco. She volunteers with stray dogs. She just really, really, really loves dogs. And now she's not a dog expert, like any type of dog expert. You would think, like someone who actually studies dogs and deals with dogs every day. She's a venture capitalist in the biotech world, and that's what she's really interested in, is investing money into biotech companies. But she knows probably more about dogs than certainly than I know, or any of her, any of the people in her world knows. And so anybody in her world who wants to know about a dog, which is pretty often because people get dogs on a pretty regular basis, always calls her. So when she was younger, when she was like 26 years old, she got calls from like these very big time CEOs that she didn't even know. Said, hey, I heard that you know a lot about dogs. Can you help me? I'm thinking about getting a dog, and these are the 3 different types I'm thinking of. What do you think would be best? Or I got this type of dog. How should I deal with this? Or any trainers? Or what should I? And she was very eligible. And so she ended up, because she had this very wide body of knowledge, she got a lot of incoming calls essentially of people who wanted to meet her. And so, if you think about knowledge, it can be really, really valuable in your success, especially if you have some knowledge in some area that not as many people who are around you know about, right? So, like, if you're, like, for instance, I know a guy who, like, knows everything about the latest phone that comes out. And everyone who knows him knows this guy knows more about phones than anything. If you want to know about what should be the BlackBerry or the Trio or the Razor or whatever phone you're thinking about getting, this guy knows about the phones. And everyone always calls this guy. I'm thinking about getting a phone right now. I called this guy recently. Everyone is always calling this guy asking his advice on what type of phone, and he'll go through a couple different steps, and he has a whole thing about it. He wants to know what you like, what you don't, your Windows, Mac, blah, 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 blah. And then he can help you walk through what's the best phone for you. And he can give you the pros and cons of all the different phone types out there. This guy gets an unbelievable amount of people calling him. In fact, like a lot of times, people will get referred into him, even that he doesn't know, who he can be helpful to. So knowledge is really, really, really important. The other thing I think you should be thinking about when you think about building your soft assets is to think about alternative investments. Now, in the hard asset world, the alternative investments are like, should I be in a REIT, or should I be in some random asset class like private equity, or should I be in junk bonds, or all these other things. These are the analogies in your hard assets. In your soft assets, your alternative investments could be something like, should I go to graduate school and get more knowledge? Should I go to a knowledge conference and learn about something? Like, should I go to Renaissance weekend, or should I go to some other knowledge conference that's around? Should I travel to some cool place and get some great experience that will really help me in what I'm doing? These are alternative investments that you should be thinking about to build your soft assets that are out there. Even coming to this tonight is kind of an alternative investment that you've chosen to make. And then the last thing before we just kind of have a little discussion and talk about it is I think you should focus on is there a razor over there? I think you should focus on short-term goals and long-term goals, and not focus on mid-term goals. So if you had to say that this is time over here, and this is value, I think the curve is essentially something like this, where this is long-term, this is mid-term, and this is short-term. And this might be like extraordinarily short-term or something like that. Maybe it's down here, like, what are you doing tonight or something. I think people underestimate the short-term, and they underestimate the long-term, and they overestimate the mid-term. Mid-term is like 5 years out. I think people often way overestimate the value of the mid-term. This is why so many people go to law school. Right? It's a really dumb idea, usually, you go to law school. In the short term, it's a really dumb idea because most people hate it. In the long term, it's a really bad idea because you're kind of stuck being a lawyer. And it's never that fun for most people. If you ask most lawyers, they don't have that much fun doing their job. And the midterm, it seems really good because when you get out of law school and you're going to make some decent amount of money. And it's kind of sick. right? So people, I think, make very bad decisions when they're focusing on the midterm. Short term should be like, how happy am I? Do I like my job, or do I like my current environment? Is this something I'm really happy with? I think people often underestimate your short-term goal. I think it's really important to be really happy where you are. Am I learning? Am I growing? Are things going well? That should be a very important calculation in short-term, in your short-term calculations, because you're going to be much more successful in what you're doing is if you're happy. And then long-term is really kind of 20 years out. You know, where is this going? It's very hard to predict sometimes. So, like, for instance, that's why, like, there's some things that are for sure important. Like, knowledge is always going to be important in the long term. Connection is always going to be important in the long term. There are other things which are much harder to predict, like, should I transfer to China or should I transfer to New York? Right? Those things might be much, much harder to predict in the long term. And often those are actually usually midterm calculations rather than truly long-term calculations. So with that, I'll actually ask Chris if he wants to add to any of these things, and then we can open up and have a dialogue and go back and forth and hopefully have a good discussion about what we're doing.
One thing that I promise people is sort of maybe because we talked about the double pyramid and everything else like that, an example of how just being maybe this is for the karmic people out there, just making connections with interesting people eventually led to some sort of business success or some sort of important event in your life.
Well, I think pretty much every important event in my life came from that. So I don't really think I've had too many important events that didn't come from something like that. You know, there's the occasional serendipity or something, but almost always it comes from like somebody who you end up doing something for, they'll end up talking to like their hairdressers, mothers, stepsons, brother-in-laws, friends, whatever, cousin twice removed. And all of a sudden, that person is the CEO of some major corporation who wants to get you in to do something because they heard about it. In my old job, basically, all my customers, people just called me because they heard somehow, and I never actually did lead gen for my old company. Now, this company that do a lot of lead gen, so it's a little different in the industry, and I make a lot of calls. But in my it is a little bit different, and I think your knowledge is really important as well. If you are, I think it's like, for instance, if you know how to code, that's like a really good thing, and I think that's very undervalued. Even if you don't end up becoming a good, even if coding is not your good profession, and the fact that if you're in Silicon Valley, the fact that I coded for a while, and now I'm not so good at it, but I used to be a little bit better at it. I think has been very helpful to me, and some of these other knowledge types of things that you can pick up. Even something relatively benign, like maybe a really good knowledge about baseball or something. Everyone has like one thing they know a lot about that most people don't know about. Sometimes more than one thing. So even something really benign can be very, very helpful in ways that's very hard to predict how that is going to be helpful. And I think a lot of times people like to be really wide. And really wide is good because you can see things in different areas and you can make connections. And there's a lot of value in that. Thomas Friedman, who's a foreign policy columnist, writes all these values of being really wide, and the fact that he knows a lot about economics and he knows about politics and he knows about a culture of things. You can build all these very interesting connections that maybe other people can't. So it is important to be wide. However, it's extremely important to be very deep somewhere. And maybe even in a couple different places, because that will allow a lot of people to basically want to interact with you on some sort of level, and they can get very quick value out of interacting with you.
Great. Why don't we go ahead and open it up to various questions and discussion?
Oh, okay. They're good at getting value out of each other. That's it.
Your bio says that you started like 3 companies before the age of 30. I was just wondering how you could acquire that depth before that age.
Well, that makes me an old man here in Silicon Valley. So some of the best entrepreneurs are, Mark Zuckerberg, I think he's 22 years old, and he runs Facebook, which I think is one of the most phenomenally successful companies out there. Sergey Brin and Larry Page are not that old either. I think they're 34, 35 right now. So I think age gives you a lot of wisdom, and you're certainly much better at managing people today than I was when I was 22. But when I was 22, I may be more willing to make mistakes than I am today. And sometimes you're high beta making mistakes. So sometimes you fail a lot. But sometimes when you go for something and you actually turn out to be correct, even though you have a 99% chance of failing, you actually succeed. Then if it works out pretty well. That's why pretty much most innovations, I'm kind of over the hill, but if you think about most innovations, they often come from people under 30. So if you're not under 30 yourself, as I'm not, I would try to hire lots of people who are young and stupid, who will make lots of mistakes, and or try to work with a lot of young and stupid people who make lots of mistakes. And maybe if you're older, you can just kind of guide them and try to recognize the bad things a little bit faster.
Earlier you talked about, with your connections, trying to spend your connections judiciously. Can you expound a little bit on what you mean by spend? Do you mean like ask for favors or use
I think so. Oftentimes, I'm sure you know someone who knows like a lot of people, and then they will never introduce anyone to those people. And it's not someone who's trying to hoard their connections, but it's actually, I think, very counterproductive. So I think everyone that you know, you should be thinking, how can I connect them to somebody else that I know, or someone I've just met, or whatever. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes the connection doesn't work. But you should be always thinking about. So every time let's say I go to coffee with someone, in my mind I'm always thinking like, who can I introduce this person to that will help them and help the other person, make it a mutual match. There are occasions where there's literally the set of people is the empty set, but that is very, very rare. Almost always the set of people is actually quite large. Of people where they can be mutual beneficial to one another. And I'm talking about mutual beneficial in a 45-minute coffee meeting or something, or a telephone meeting or some other type of meeting. And sometimes even in I will specify, you guys should meet for coffee, or you should meet for dinner, or you should meet by telephone, right? Depending on how valuable I think it's going to be for each of those people. But you should be thinking about how you can help this person, and that's what I mean by spending.
I think value those kind of virtual connections. To make sure you have
I think they're hard to value, and they're not. I would say their value is very, very limited. So, like I have a rule. I don't connect to people on LinkedIn that I don't know. Just so no one actually. So there's no understanding about LinkedIn. I wish LinkedIn actually had a tally on it of the number of connections that you've rejected, and not just the number that you accepted. So basically, anyone who has like their email after their name on LinkedIn, I don't connect to. Because those are people who are just out there connecting to everybody. And so I think it's important that you are somewhat judicious about that, and you name who you rec. Because when you're connecting to people, you're basically doing a record warranty saying this person's a good person and this other person's a good person. So you have to have some sort of knowledge about them, and at least have met them. I mean, maybe it's not even face to face, but at least have had some sort of interaction where you traded emails with them, and maybe read their blog for a while, and then maybe talked to them on the phone, or some sort of interaction with them. I mean, not everyone that I know I've actually met face to face. But there's some people I think I know relatively well because I've had other types of rich interactions with them. But it's got to be some sort of two-way interaction with someone before I think you can actually feel like you can direct them to somebody else.
Now, to be fair to Reed and LinkedIn and those guys, I think that LinkedIn does have its uses. I mean, I think
LinkedIn's great. I love LinkedIn.
Exactly. You connect with people that you do know, and that allows you to stay more up on what they're doing. You can see their updates. You can find out all these things. But it's a tool to enhance the relationship that already exists.
And it's really often to find new people. I mean, when we're trying to hire people, we often go on LinkedIn to look for something very specific. We try to often go on there. There's a lot of people who have their LinkedIn's a very cool thing because it's a place where you're allowed to put your resume, and like your employer doesn't get mad. Right? So I mean, I often go on there. I'm looking for like some type of software engineer or another, which is basically always, or something else when we get to contact people. I don't always contact someone through LinkedIn. I'll often just email them directly. It's usually not that hard to figure out anybody's email. But I think LinkedIn is a really awesome tool. I love it. I think it's a great site. But I think you should be judicious about, how you're building connections. In general, not just LinkedIn, but anywhere online.
I think some exceptions to what you're saying about LinkedIn, because I agree with what you're saying, but I go another step further.
Okay.
I do allow everybody to connect with me. However, what I then keep in mind is who they are. So if I ever get a request for a connection with someone else, then I will pass it along with a comment about how well I know this person. And I would know also from the connection as to whether or not they want these kind of funds.
And there are a lot of different strategies, and you can choose the one that you think works for you. I mean, certainly my strategy won't work for everybody. I'm also like a contact nut, like I always update everything, my contacts, and I also have an assistant to help me, and I have other tools. I've invested a lot, like the scanning tools and all the other tools to help me, and I've got 4 computers to do all this different stuff. So, everyone's different in how much they want to invest and do in certain different areas. So everyone has a different kind of point on those things. Just
Here's some of the tools you use for contact management.
so I think tools for contact. The question was tools for contact management. I think they're all really bad. I think there are really no good tools for contact management. I think it's really horrible. I can't believe that no one's figured this thing out. I mean, it's really, I just don't understand it. I mean, Outlook is the worst program in the world, but it's probably better than all the others. And it's just amazing how bad everything else that's out there is. So, I happen to use Outlook. It's probably something better that I should be using. It just happens to integrate with a lot of other things. Like it integrates my phone, it integrates my Slack, so it integrates with a few other things that I use. But it's certainly a really bad solution. It's really slow. It's really hard to search. I have to use a Google application on top of Outlook to actually search my own Outlook. Right? It doesn't make any sense, right? Like Google, but it's a really horrible program out there. And any of you the problem is like 1 million people have tried to build better, what they call personal information managers, better PIMs out there. There was this whole thing called what was the open source thing?
Chandler.
Was it? Chandler, exactly, which was supposed to be the panacea, which unfortunately never flied. There's actually, I'm reading this great book on Chandler right now, which if any of you write or read software, are interested in writing software or something like that, it's got the book's name.
4,000 bucks, 3 years, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Scott Rosenberg's the author, right?
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah, from Slate. Yeah. So there's been all these different things, but no one's cracking on it. So you probably have anybody who's got a solution, has got a solution which is stitched together with a lot of duct tape. And that's just, and whatever solution works for you. I mean, I know people that use index cards, and it's probably like not that much worse than what I'm doing. So whatever you think works for you, works for you. Other questions or ideas? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm always in a quandary when I come to these events to network because I'm your sort of typical CEO that's startup, and so I'm looking for a CEO that's more fundable than me. I'm looking for a technical co-founder. I know enough to start the conversation by saying to the person I'm meeting, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, what do you need? Can I help make your life more wonderful?" And they usually most people here, they have nice paying jobs, they don't really need anything.
That's true.
So I don't have the opportunity to really help them. And even if they said, "Yeah, I'm looking for this and that," since I'm sort of new here, I don't really have that much to offer them. So then, very quickly, I'm telling them what I'm looking for, what I'm needing. So I'm feeling like the Machiavellian guy there. And is there any way to kind of transcend that?
Yeah, I would maybe go to just meet different types of people. I mean, there are certainly people you can help that are out there. I mean, some new person just graduated college that's looking for career advice, you can probably help that person all day long. There's a lot of different people out there that you can help probably with a lot of different types of things that they have. The other thing, I think it makes people uncomfortable if the question is, I actually have people, I don't think you asked this question, but I've had people ask me this question like, how can I help you? And it always makes me really uncomfortable asking that question. I used to have one of my board members always used to call me up and be like, how can I help you? He's on my board. And I still felt really uncomfortable in that type of relationship. So usually you try to have to figure it out somehow. means you need some sort of relation. It's hard to know in like 2 minutes how you can help someone. You need some sort of relationship with them. And then usually you should just offer, like, you know what, I think I'm going to introduce you to this person. Or, you know, I just read this book that's really good. I'm going to send you this book. I think you might want to enjoy this book. Or, here's an article that I read, or send them something.
But when you only have 2 or 3 minutes in the half hour before events like this start, what would you recommend saying to someone you don't know?
I don't know. I'm not too good at meeting people I don't know, personally. So, I don't know what you should, I don't know what you should do. I think the best thing is just, you know, the pleasantries, have something interesting to say. If they spark your interest, keep in touch with them. I usually try to keep in touch with pretty much everybody that I meet, even if I exchange business cards with them, just kind of put them in my database or whatever. But I think it's sometimes hard to think, like, because you're not going to be able to help everybody that you meet. And so it's sometimes hard to actually, it's like, that's why I don't like networking events personally. I pretty much never go to any, like, I'm really interested in foreign policy. I like foreign policy. It has nothing to do with my job, but I just really like it. I'm just really fascinated by it. So I go to a lot of, like, foreign policy lectures, like really deep foreign policy lectures, and I read these, like, really big books, and I go there and I geek out and I learn all about foreign policy. It's really fun for me. And I happen to meet all these other, like, foreign policy geeks, and we get along really well. We, like, talk about, like, you know, the treaty of, like, you know, 1812 or whatever, and we get like really excited about all this stuff, and we're like, we geek out together. So if you have a certain interest, I would follow that interest. I mean, this woman, she went to all these different dog things, and she met a lot of dog people there, but sometimes she met other people, and she got really knowledgeable about something, and maybe that kind of worked for her better. Yes?
I was going to say, this is necessarily one-to-one. In other words, in order to help you, you have to help me.
Absolutely, right.
So we just have to want to help. I help them, and my person, and just all the
That's a
time.
great attitude.
So we don't know what I was saying, yeah, how the hell is it? Well, I think we do it all in one package. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean,
Someone around.
there's a certain limit. I mean, I do want to help everyone I meet, but like, you could literally do like helping people all day long. So this is you can't. You're going to be, you know, just sitting by the sidewalk and just helping everyone cross the street, right? So, I mean, there is a limit to what you can do to help people. So you have to kind of figure out what that is. For everyone, it's different. I mean, some people are Mother Teresa, and they really do try to help everybody. And some people, you know, have other priorities. You know, it's okay to spend time with your family, you know, have fun every once in a while, and, you know, do other things, or play video games, or whatever you like to do. Yeah.
I would like to get some validation from you that I'm the typical not good in following up in networking and connections.
Yeah.
Right now I have to manage the team and build them, and so I have very few choices. So I want to ask you basically how much time whether it will be effective.
Yeah.
Whether it will be having a blog for both internal and outside.
Yeah.
Really, I think that's the best way to be because we have a wealth of knowledge of doing something.
Yeah.
And the product is really good. We can offer the product for premium version for people, and go to teaching event and try to make the best out of the time. But it seems to be quite purposeful. So not quite sure whether that will be enough for the company. And
I think the most successful people I know are making connections are the people that have like serious hobbies outside of their work. And those are the, I mean, it's a little bit of a bow tie, right? So if you think of where you're at, you know, what happens is like, if I think of my own life, like, let's say I know a lot about foreign policy. I mean, I don't know that much, but I know more than most tech people, right? So if I know a decent amount about foreign policy, and I know a decent amount about technology. Now, in Silicon Valley, most people will think, well, this guy doesn't really know that much about technology. He knows some, but he's not nearly an expert. And, you know, if you were like hanging out in the UN or something like that, people are like, this guy doesn't really know a lot about foreign policy. He knows something, but he's certainly not an expert. But, like, the people in the UN, I'm an expert in technology. And the people in technology, I'm an expert in foreign policy. Because of the people that they know, I know more about the other than the other side, right? Pretty much no one in the UN knows anything about technology. Not that some people in technology know about foreign policy, but there's not many. And so, depending on what you're interested in, and there's the same thing about this woman with dogs. She knew a lot about biotech, she knew a lot about dogs, and or whatever you might want to know, whatever the person knows about phones or whatever your serious hobby that you're interested in. So I would pursue your hobby very aggressively, and that's probably a better career move than almost any other thing that you can do.
Provided that's a hobby that you actually interact with other people every once in a while. Let's say all hobbies. You're really trying to
There are some destructive hobbies out there. I wouldn't like necessarily counsel you to be a drug dealer. Frankly, that might be a good career. I don't know. I would actually meet a lot of people in Silicon Valley doing that. Yeah, you have to be off of them and maybe at a high quality.
I wanted to share an idea from my past experience based on something you mentioned, which triggered something. A while ago, I managed a team of engineers, and I asked each of them to put a hobby on their business card. And some of them said travel, some of them said investment, some of them said movies, and that really became a big deal, gave them multiple dimensions until the HR came and did So one thing, if we are able to, just put some kind of hobby on the business side, whatever you do.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I think I would feel it. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. And the other thing is, if you're in an organization where HR beats you up or something like that, that's a pretty good reason to leave, I think. Life is short. If you want to optimize for the short term, why be somewhere where all these crazy rules and regulations that are beating you down? If you're one of those people who are always complaining that the bureaucracy is beating you down, my basic remedy for that is to leave. There is no reason to be there, and I guarantee you, if a few people start doing that, the policies will change relatively quickly. I mean, it is a people's market today. It is not a company market. Every one of you in this, the unemployment rate in Silicon Valley right now for people with college degrees is 0.3%. Every one of you can find another job very quickly. Maybe not in 1 second, but you can find it relatively quickly. You're a very hot commodity. You're probably much higher commodity than you think. So, no sense putting up with basic corporate BS in my opinion. Because if the corporation, and again, I might be a little biased on a startup, but these corporations that are out there, they have, for instance, I'll give you an example. Microsoft, and I love Microsoft. Well, I don't even proud of it. But if you go to Mountain View, Microsoft, they have all this great art. They're not allowed to have any art showing dogs. Right? Why is that? Why can't, and this is a true story, this is true. Why can't Microsoft show dogs, right? And any art, show dogs, I love the dogs play poker, right? There's a lot of art that's out there, right? Why can't they show dogs? Well, because there's 3 people on the corporate campus who, or maybe not even any